Hey guys, this is going to be a quick tutorial, or well, as quick as I can make it, for creating a full low poly character 3D model. I'm going to use as a template this character drawing that my wife did. So this is going to be kind of a straightforward process. We're not going to go through all of the high poly modeling or texturing, all of that. I'm going to focus primarily on just building a low poly shape using basically a character sheet or character template. And so you can kind of see the process that I go through there, how I put all those pieces together, what things I focus on. I use segment modeling for the most part instead of doing more of like a box modeling workflow. And that's because I find that almost always it's better to work with characters with some specific pieces cut out. And that's why, so this is a character with some obvious clothing pieces as opposed to having maybe more like a skin tight or like maybe leotard kind of outfit, because modeling stuff with clothing involved tends to have a few more considerations than you would have for pieces that don't include clothes. So we'll go ahead and just jump into this real quick. So I have my Maya scene. The first thing I want to figure out, because this is always my good frame of reference, is I want to find out what 5'6" is in meters, because that's the height of the character. So if somebody's like, say, let's just say 5.5 feet, which is 5.6. So that means that's going to be 1.6764 or 1.68 meters. And then we'll do that in centimeters, so that'll be 168 centimeters. So I'm going to quickly draw out a box. I'm going to click on the poly modeling, select a cube, and then once that's created, I'm going to go to the poly cube option in the channel box. I'm going to change the height to 168, and then I'm just going to change the width and depth to like 32, just so I can see that roughly for scale. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit the insert key, hold down the V key, and snap my pivot down to the floor, hit the insert key again, go to the type in over here at the top, type 000. And then that way I have an idea of where this is for the sake of actually creating my my template. So I'm going to just call this scale ref, just so I can use this as a basis. And then what I need to do is I need to create a plane that I can use for my my character sheet. So I'm going to create a basic plane. This time I don't need to worry too much about what the size is of it. I'm just going to scale it. So I'm going to grab the polygon plane options. I'm going to change the divisions down to 1 and 1. And then what I need to do is basically I need to make sure, like I just scaled this uniformly, which is fine. But what I need to make sure is that the original ratio is actually the same as the image that I'm working with. So I'm going to go ahead and find my character. I'm going to go to my info. View actual size. Okay, that's fine. I don't need that. File info. And so we're looking at 6,600 by 5,100. So just for the sake of making sure that this is exactly right, I'm going to just type in a width of 6,600 and a height of 5,100. And that's going to make it really big. So I'm just going to scale that down a bit, because I think I scaled it up too much initially. Okay. And so then we'll go ahead and apply the image to this. So I'm going to right click, select assign favorite material Lambert. That should be fine. Go into my attribute editor. I'm going to change this to character template. Under the color, I'm going to select the checker box. I'm going to click on file. Going to hit that folder option. Browse to my desktop, scroll to where I have my orthographic image. So that'll apply to that plane there. I'm going to go ahead and hit 6 on the keyboard to make sure that this is actually displaying the character sheet, and it looks like it actually is already coming in correctly because we made sure that it was matching the same dimension. So then what I need to do is I need to make sure that I'm actually scaling this generally so it's actually just the right size to match up with my character size reference. So I'm going to hold down the E key and click and hold the left mouse button. I'm going to make sure I'm enabling discrete rotate because right now I want to be able to rotate this pretty easily just for positioning purposes. Basically I think the easiest way to look at this is probably just to look at the front view. So I'm just going to basically scale this uniformly. I'm making sure I'm always doing it uniformly. If I want to make it a little easier to scale, I can also hit the insert key and slide the pivot over just so that I'm scaling relative to that particular part instead. And basically my goal is just to make it that roughly that this character is going to be the height that I was expecting her to be. And pretty close, not too bad. And again, I mean, it doesn't need to be 100% perfect as long as we're keeping these consistent. And since we have all 3 of them on the same sheet, that works out pretty well. So I'm going to focus mainly on the front and side view, but we may use the back view for some context. So I'm going to go ahead and quickly use Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop tool. I'm going to insert an edge loop separating. Oh, and I actually need to hit undo here. It looks like that. It looks like that messed up the UVs for some reason. Let's go ahead and make sure that we have a look at the UVs here. Okay, so it looks like the UVs got shifted. Now I could do this manually, but if I wanted to be really specific, I could just reproject it. So I could like select the faces here, and I could shift right click mapping, planar mapping, and then that'll just make sure that I have that set up correctly. Yep. The docking in Maya 2018 is really annoying. I find that sometimes I want to turn that off, but I use it enough that I just wish they made it better. Okay. Oh, it's okay. That's the wrong orientation. So we got to make sure that we grab the UVs there. And then we can also rotate them. So I can go to the transform. And in this case, because it's all a perfect square, I can just rotate it by 190 degree click. See what that looks like there. Obviously, that's not where it needs to be yet. And rotate it again. Do it a couple times until I get that positioned back where it was supposed to be. And then I want to make sure that I go to my Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop tool. Okay. Relative distance from edge, all that is fine. Okay, so I'm going to insert an edge there, and I'm going to insert an edge here so that we have basically kind of a separation there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab each of these faces. I'm going to go to Edit Mesh, Extract, and that will allow me to make each of these pieces separated. So I'll grab this face, Edit Mesh, Extract, and then that will leave this here. So I'm going to go to Windows, Outliner, and we'll see that there's like now 3 different poly surfaces, and there's a couple of transforms. So I'm going to go to Edit, Delete All by Type, History. Then I can pull all 3 of these out from there and just delete the group. And so then I have this, I'm going to call this template back because that's the one over here on the back. Call this template side. Call this one template front. And just because I want to make sure that I have a good amount of control over this, I'm going to select all of these pieces. I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to call this layer, and there's a layer over here on the bottom right of the screen. I'm going to call this template. And I'm going to use that as a reference type layer. I'm going to use the scale, and I'm also going to add a new layer. I want to make sure that these are actually added to the layer. So if you create a new layer, it doesn't automatically add it. So I'm going to go to scale ref, right click, add selected objects, grab each of these template pieces, right click on the template, add selected objects. Then I can toggle those things on and off in the layers just to be sure that I know where they are. This one will be scale reference. And hit save. Okay. And so then what we need to do is we need to make sure that we're going to position these pieces so that they are maximally usable. Generally, I like to have my characters facing forward on the Z axis because that's usually the good forward direction for math in game content. So since I set this as a reference layer, I can turn that off for a second and just make it so I can easily navigate with these. So, okay. Alrighty. So I'm going to slide these into place. Now, this may not be 100% symmetrical, so that's something that we want to watch out for. I usually prioritize symmetry in the face. So if I'm looking at this, it's not 100% symmetrical. By the way, hit 6 on the keyboard for each of these pieces to make sure that you're actually grabbing them or seeing them in practice. So I'm going to grab all 3 of these, and I can see that the feet are a little bit low here. So I'm going to, as long as I grab them and pull them up all at the same time, it should affect all of them equally. Now, I want to make sure I also can see through this scale reference, so I'm going to assign favorite material Lambert. I'm going to increase the transparency on that. And I'm just going to call this scale ref matte. And then that way I can just see, okay, so this one is directly in the center, so I can try to generally position this character so it's here. And then I'm going to try to make sure that my face is also positioned so that the line going straight down the middle is as close as I can. But we don't have to rely too heavily on symmetry, so I'm just going to, let me see if I can hit the insert key here. Looks like we may have some tiny issues with symmetry. I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, so we don't want to rotate that. So okay, so we'll just accept that as that is. That's fine. Usually you want to just like double check and make sure that all those things are symmetrical, but this should be okay for this purpose. We can work around it. Okay, so then and then for right now, I don't actually really need the back template. So I'm just not going to worry about that one. So we'll have this here. We've got the kind of the basic orthographic template here of the front and side. And then we also want to make sure that we have a little bit of a better perspective view so that it's a little less distortion, just so that when we're working on this, we can see it better. So I just noticed that my, my menu bar is actually missing from my viewport here. This is actually something that's happened sometimes, depending on whether you've reverted to default settings or what have you. So if I go to Windows, Settings, Preferences, and then go to Preferences, or if I open the Preferences here, that's weird. It looks like I got an error doing that. Then I can go to Interface. Let's see where that is. Interface up at the top. And then what we want to do is we want to make sure that the show menu bar in panels is checked, and it actually was in this case, so that looks like there was a weird issue. I had recently reinstalled Maya. So if you turn off that, you won't see that menu bar in panels, but if you turn that on, that checkbox, that will display that menu bar there. So it looks like I actually had something kind of goofy go on there that caused that to not display. Anyway, so we're in good shape here. We can then go to View Camera Attribute Editor, and then we can just adjust the focal length up to get a viewport that is just a little bit more orthographic and has a bit less perspective in it, which is useful. So I can do maybe like a focal length of like 90 or something like that. It's not going to be completely perspective free, but it does allow me to kind of at a glance get a little bit better, a little bit of a better look at things and how they're developing. So, okay, so then that's basically it for setting up the template. We should be in good shape from there. So I'm going to go through the process of putting together the rest of the parts of the character.